I'm working on a project to look at the future of astronaut training in space, using a combination of robotics and mixed reality. But then finally, I think the most successful thing was a bomb disposal vehicle. That was the headset I used. And that is now in, as you can see, that's now in the National Air and Space Museum. But the Teletact was, and in fact, if I can show you this, the actual Teletact here. The Teletact was, let's bring this in here.
Hey guys, it's me Avedivedi and you are listening me on XR podcast. After a very long time, I know, but still now today's guest gonna make it up for you because I have none other than Professor Bob Stone. He's really been a pioneer in the industry and more than 4 decades of experience what he's going to share with us. He has experience across so many domains like defense, healthcare, space, heritage, and so much more. So, Professor Bob Stone is also one of the first European to experience NASA's VR system. He has worked with NASA and several so many projects. He has just shown me some hidden gems of his portfolio as well. So, I'm going to bring him on the screen and we are going to start this conversation. Hi, Professor Bob. It's so great to speak to you.
Avi, good afternoon from the UK. Lovely sunny afternoon. But yes, it's great pleasure to be here with you.
Amazing, Professor Bob. So, Professor, let me start with what you are doing right now. So, what you are doing with the University of Buckingham and how things are going.
Things are going kind of okay. I mean, at the moment, we're we're doing a lot more effort in taking virtual reality and 360 video experiences into care homes, hospitals, hospices. That's been a major change in my work over the years. But the reason I've changed it is because of the pleasure it brings these people who are maybe at the end of their lives or they can't get out, and being able to, for example, give them the experience of sitting on the front of a heritage steam locomotive, or in one case flying with me in the back of a World War II Spitfire. And when you take these to these places and let people experience them, let the people just be able to look around and see the countryside, the pleasure they get and the reward I get is incredible. So that's my main project at the moment. I'm also working actually with my youngest son. I'm working on a project to look at the future of astronaut training in space, using a combination of robotics and mixed reality. So it's, you know, two different ends of the spectrum in terms of my particular interests at the moment.
Amazing. So, when I was reading about you, first I had to read a lot because 40 years, 4 decades of career in the space of XR is really surprising and rare and full of so much gems. So I noticed that you have worked on something called so many kind of simulators, but one of the kind of simulator was bomb diffusal simulator. So that caught my attention the most. So what was that kind of experiment or something?
Um, that was a project, a series of projects that we worked on in the 2000s, the noughties. You know, we were very lucky when I moved to the university in 2003, and before that, I was a director of a virtual reality company in the north of England. But when we moved there, we were lucky enough to be awarded something called, and it's a bit of a mouthful. It's the Human Factors Integration Defense Technology Center. And this, for us, was a great project to be able to show people the importance of human factors and human-centered design, which we'll probably talk about a little bit later, and how that can make or break a virtual reality project. Now, we did so many projects in that nine years. I think it was a 9-year project. The bomb diffusion or the bomb disposal project evolved over quite a number of years, and it started by looking at, could we simulate using the current virtual reality tools, and we were using we were using the Far Cry, the CryEngine tool to recreate countryside scenes, for example, of pathways with different kinds of flora and fauna, different kinds of puddles of water. Could we use that to simulate the complexity of being able to detect the cues that there may be an improvised explosive device along the track? Very difficult. We were quite successful. We then tried to do the same for a Middle Eastern village, which was again quite a challenge, because we were given access to, obviously, to pictures showing how these bombs are placed, which is quite concerning at the best of times. But then finally, I think the most successful thing was a bomb disposal vehicle, which was called Cutlass. And at the time, this was a six-wheeled vehicle with a multiple degrees of freedom robot arm, very, very complicated, and the world's worst control panel. We had nothing to do with the control panel or the human interface, which was really annoying. But the human interface was appalling. It had been so badly designed. So the idea was we had to replicate that to train people to control this robot. Because when you have a multi-axis robot and you've got 6 individual joysticks, that's actually very complex. But nevertheless, we did that, and we had a number of scenarios. We had a high street where you could drive the robot down. You could look into different places. You could pick up suitcases. And we had a big football stadium where you could take the robot in and practice how you would get this robot up the steps to try and inspect the seats and things. So it was a complicated program, but at the end of the project, we were asked to build, I've forgotten now, but something, I think we were asked to build something like 30 of these simulators. And these simulators, and this is very unusual for a university, we built 30 simulators with a small company nearby. And those simulators went to across the UK, Gibraltar, Cyprus, and they were used for training the future bomb disposal robot operators. So that was quite a successful project for us.
That's amazing. As you said, creating a robot that can go on its, let's say, controlled by a distance, and then go and look for these kits, these bombs, and try to defuse them. It's quite a challenge even in today's time with today's technology. So what was this year?
Probably 2010, 2011. It was certainly quite some time. It's quite some time ago, but it was quite advanced for the years. But yes, it was, and it was one of these projects where we had to work very closely with the army trainers, because they had their own ideas. Many of them didn't believe that virtual reality could help with training, and that's still a problem. We faced that many times, but once they saw what was possible and how much money we could save by avoiding damage to the real robot, then it was a completely different story. Yes, virtual reality works for us.
Yeah. So you are really the true pioneer of this industry. As I talk about, what was the initial flame? How this passion sparked within you? When was the first contact, the discovery of XR for a person like you who was into, let's say, psychology at that time, and you were studying human-centric designs and everything? So how did this discovery came into your life?
Well, when I left university, I which is a very long time ago, I was lucky enough to be offered a job at what was then called British Aerospace. Today it's BAE Systems. But amongst the projects that I got involved with at BAE Systems was looking at teleoperation, so removing humans from hazardous environments, battlefield, underwater, and space, and replacing them with robots. Now, we were lucky enough to win a number of research contracts to look at the human-centered design, human factors, and space teleoperation. Part of that enabled me to go to a conference in Maryland, in the United States, where I met a fantastic guy called Steve Ellis, Dr. Steve Ellis. He's one of the who's who in the AWE Hall of Fame, and he invited me to California, to San Francisco, and took me into the NASA Ames, their human factors laboratory, where, amongst other things, they asked me to put on this very strange helmet, which contained two pocket TVs that were actually bought from Radio Shack, a collection of optics, which were developed by a really great guy called Eric Howlett, who also built his own headset. And then they asked me to walk up to this wireframe escalator. So very simple escalator, which you can see on my YouTube site. And by standing on the bottom of this escalator, it took me up. So even though my vestibular system was telling me I was on the ground, staying still, my visual system was wait a minute, you are going up. And then you walk along the top of the escalator and you get on another escalator to go down. So you can see from the video, the graphics are incredibly simple, are incredibly wireframe. They're really simple, but that movement was enough. And the perspective, you can see the perspective changes as you go up to the top level, and then you have to walk across and get onto the escalator coming down. That was an amazing experience. I mean, even by today's standard, and you can see there the hand. That hand was controlled. That was being controlled by, and here's this is Scott Fisher, another good friend of mine. You can see the glove. The glove he's wearing is a forerunner to the VPL data glove, the famous data glove, and that was I think that's the very headset that I was wearing at the time. So yeah, that's where my career changed, completely changed. There you can see the data glove. The little black structure on the end is it was a Porhemus isotrack tracking system, which enabled you to follow the movements of the hand. So initially it was put on the wrist, and you also had one on a headset. And back then, the headsets, the gloves, and these trackers were incredibly expensive. People moan today about how much virtual reality kit costs. Believe me, in the early 1990s, it cost a lot more than it does today, even back then. But that was enough. That was enough to convince me that it was time for my career to change.
Wow. So whenever we search for NASA's view, which the headset you just talked about, this image always comes. So is this a marketing image from NASA, or is it something?
No, that was
astronaut training?
Some of it's astronaut training. I mean, the one with the girl and her hair being blown back. That was. Yeah. But if you can see that NASA headset on the top row, can you see the top row, fourth one along?
Yep.
Which is now actually in one. I think it's now one of the Smithsonian museums. That was the headset I used, and that is now in. As you can see, that's now in the National Air and Space Museum. But what an amazing piece of equipment. And you can see the housing there, which contained the two Radio Shack pocket, the good old pocket TVs of the day.
And the most surprising thing is now this technology is available and accessible to us in the cost like $350, $400.
Yeah. Absolutely, things like the Meta Quest 3. We also use the Vive Flow, which is a very low cost, £190, maybe less. But things like the Meta Quest 3, which does inside out tracking, hand tracking, Yeah, and some of the other headsets that are coming on, eye tracking. I mean, the amount of functionality contained in today's headsets, we couldn't even imagine that back in 1987. It was enough of a challenge to make sure that when you moved your head from left to right, that the image would take its time to catch up. So you had to move very, very slowly. Otherwise, you get completely disorientated because because the lag in the tracking systems was horrendous.
So tracking system lag was a big challenge, or the frame rate that those graphic engines can produce were bigger? I
Both,
mean, both.
both. The frame rates, certainly until companies like Silicon Graphics started to bring their supercomputing power to bear on virtual reality, the frame rate, the rendering, the rendering turnover or the computing power, you have to be very careful about the definition of the graphics, how much you wanted the computer to draw. So culling of objects that weren't in the scene was absolutely vital. But even then, when you have one Polhemus tracker on your head and one Polhemus tracker on your wrist, and you pray that you do not use those in close to any metal at all, because it would set up eddy currents, and that would just kill the simulation dead completely. But even with those, you were still getting, sometimes you were getting just a tiny, I can't remember whether it was 1 or 2 hertz update rate. So you really did have to, and we did this numerous times when we were visited by the television. We had to teach ourselves to move slowly so that it didn't look rubbish on television, which it normally did. So yeah, there were some real challenges there. I mean, image resolution, frame rate, tracking lag, the wearability of the headsets, which interestingly hasn't improved as much as I would like. But yeah, and things like the glove. I mean, the fiber optics in the glove would sometimes detach. So you had these little fiber optics going across the fingers, and they were held on, they were glued onto the glove with drinking straws. So the fiber optics would go through the drink, and occasionally these little drinking straws would come off. And that meant you'd see your hand on the screen, but maybe your middle finger disappeared and was poking at the back of your wrist. And it was like, this is crazy. How can I get this glove to record the gestures that I want? Because at the time, the glove was your way of walking through the world. So you'd point to go forward, or you grasp to pick something up, or you do some other gesture. And if the glove wasn't working, forget it.
Crazy tech. So I have worked with those magnetic sensors in today's time, and believe me, even in today's, we have to be, especially when I'm making a medical application or something, I have to be like really create a environment in which there is no distortion, no metal objects and things like that. So I can
Yeah.
assume in those days when sensory, as you had mentioned, 1 or 2 hertz were there, so it has been like incredibly impossible task which you guys were into. So apart from that, what I mean, of course, the cost, the processing power, the sensory information, everything was lagging. Any challenge that you would say that the horrible challenge or technological limitation at that time? What frustrated you the most?
Yeah, plenty. I mean, the sense, and again, this is something that hasn't developed enough, in my opinion, which is haptics. And I
Okay.
think with haptics, in back in the 1990s, because we had trouble in accurately visualizing 3D and accurately approaching an object. It was very interesting to collide with an object and go into that object or shoot past the object. There was very little support for accurately visualizing virtual worlds in 3D. So we decided that we would build a glove that would work with the current realm of virtual reality gloves, and we came up with this thing called the Teletact, which is also on my YouTube page. A very old video, very grainy video. But the Teletact was, and in fact, if I can show you this, the actual Teletact here. The Teletact was, let's bring this in here. Just about to see this, I think. Yeah,
it's incredible. Yeah, we can see.
So I'm working on a reverse view here, so I'm going to be a little bit careful. So the Teletact was a simple glove, simple material. There we go. Let me go over here. The Teletact was a glove that was consisting of a number of individual pockets. Okay, you see these pockets here. A larger pocket across here, which had a plastic support to give reaction or resistance to the balloons that were inflating inside. And then we had the microcapillary tubes, which you can see here, just down here. These microcapillary tubes were feeding each of those pockets and also taking the air out. That was important because we needed to inflate and deflate very, very quickly. Now, what happened? In terms of giving you an additional cue to having made contact with an object, it wasn't bad. There is, you can see the complexity of it. There's this huge series of little servos which were taking the and if you may just see there, if you blink, you miss it. So we were experimenting with this, and it was kind of okay. But one thing convinced me with this kind of approach, and even today we see pneumatics, we see piezoelectrics, we see little mechanical tactors, we see all kinds of different ways of putting pressure on the skin, and people claim that they can feel all kinds of textures, all kinds of objects, and it's not true. It's simply not true. Yes, it'll give you a simple input stimulus, but there is not one transducer yet available that will satisfy all of the different mechanoreceptors in human skin and the different types of human skin. But it worked. It kind of worked, and it worked well enough for VPL, which is the company that made the fiber optic data glove, to approach us and offer to put our Teletact glove on the bottom of their data glove commercially. It's a fantastic result. And then history took over, and VPL Inc. went belly up and died. The company died a death, which is a real shame. But the lesson that we learned was haptics is a very complex process. It's not just about mechanical stimulation of the fingertip. It involves cognition. It involves vision. It involves things like constancies. And there's such a complex process that humans go through to pick up something, particularly if that something is unfamiliar to them, that there's not one product on the market today that will do that effectively. There are a lot of expensive products out there. Some very, I won't mention the company's name, but the company's names, but there are some expensive products out there that do not work. And my feeling is that only when we get a reliable and well-researched brain-computer interface that we will be able to simulate touch, force, torque, and all the other things that we rely on as human beings.
So instead of going from actual touch sensation of the texture that we want to feel, like the traditional method, like it has to go from the sensory. So you want to bypass all of that and go directly from the brain signals.
Yeah, yes, because I think when we dream, we experience touch and force. But the problem is, if you're trying to create a realistic sense of force, and this is true in surgery. So it's very true in surgery, and it would be true in bomb disposal as well. That what you don't want is to give the wrong quality of stimulus because that will cause an error which could be fatal, absolutely
Yep.
fatal. So at the moment, there's nothing out there that will do that. I cannot see anything in the near horizon that will do it. So that's going to that
What
remains.
if we just simply start reducing the actuator size, like keep reducing the actuator size to let's say a fiber wire, small fiber wire that we can control. Like
I
imagine a
still
million of those in a glove, like we have right now the processor conditions.
I still think that the touch and force, the tactile sensation would not be accurate. I just cannot see how by making the stimulus on the finger, no matter how fine that is, that you will create something that is meaningful and matches with what your cognition and what your vision is telling you. I
Hmm.
think it's a big challenge. I think it's an absolutely huge challenge, I believe that there are other sensors that will that will provide improved sense of immersion that will happen before haptics. I think haptics has got a very long way to go.
Hmm. So recently, I have studied a lot of people, especially disabled people, who have learned to see colors, learn to using brain interfaces as well as the new technologies, where let's say we can show combine the colors into audio sequences and play back the audio sequences to
Mm.
recreate the color in their neural systems. So there are ways becoming. So could I think could something similar can be done for let's say haptic or tactile feedbacks as well.
I think you're right. I think things can be done. I'm still very skeptical that that will then provide as detailed or as your cat suddenly your cat's doing a photo bomb.
Yeah.
I think I think it's going to be a long time before that provides a credible sense of touch and force and torque to the fully abled human being. Reproducing or replacing sensory deficits with things like vibrotactile stimulation, auditory stimulation, different colors, linking color with sound. I think that's great when it comes to people who uh, are less able in those capabilities and those human facets. But for accurate training, or whether that be you know, carrying out some kind of, I don't know, maybe minimal invasive therapy, minimally invasive surgery, or open surgery, or whatever. I think we've got a long way to go before
Yeah.
that's going to provide something that's safe.
So we are already talking about medical use cases. You have
Mm.
founded a company called Mist VR, right? So where you were working on a lot of laparoscopic simulators. So how was that experience, and what year was it when this whole thing started? What was doctors' response? How they?
Nine,
Uh, yeah.
yeah, 1993 when we were in Manchester, and the Manchester Royal Infirmary, the main hospital, joined our little initiative to look at how virtual reality could improve training of surgeons in the future. The Mist VR system um, had a very difficult and almost catastrophic history in that at the time, very similar to what I just described to you about the reliance on haptics. We built a haptic system. We built a haptic feedback system that would actually hold, or that would contain, a laparoscopic instrument, a pair of scissors or a trochanter or whatever, and it worked very, very well. And we had deformable tissue models on this big 250,000 pounds graphic supercomputer, and it all looked quite good. Stereoscopic vision as well, without glasses, or what we call auto stereoscopic vision. But then the surgeons came to see what we'd done, and they said, "This is terrible. What have you done? When you pull the tissue like that, it doesn't behave like that. It doesn't feel like that. many of them said we don't need 3D. We're working in such a tiny space that we get more depth information from lighting and reflections and shadows. So we spent all that money on a system that we thought was right, and it wasn't. It was completely wrong. So anyway, we went back into the operating theatre. Fortunately, the contract survived. We went back into the operating theatre. We did 4 afternoons of working with a keyhole surgeon, with a GI, sort of general upper or general intestinal surgeon, and we came up with the concept of the MIST system. And in fact, the real and virtual tasks in MIST are also on my YouTube site in the healthcare section. Well, what we did was we didn't, because the graphics capability was simply not capable of simulating realistic tissue in high resolution detail. What we looked at was, well, what are we trying to train? We're trying to train the surgeon who wants to graduate from open surgery to keyhole surgery, which is a kind of remote surgery. So we need to train the surgeon to be able to move the instruments in a way that reflects what he will see on the screen when he's put the instrument into the body. And if he moves the instrument one way, of course, the tip of the instrument moves another. And then how does he or she hold the tissue accurately in order to carry out diathermy or to carry out cutting and so on. And that's what MIST does. It's a very simple set of what I call psychomotor primitives. So there are spheres, there are cubes of different colors, and you have to manipulate these. You have to manipulate these in order to get scores to improve the training, or to understand what it's like to train with these instruments. Right. So there is this is if I remember, this is task number 1, where your left hand is holding the cystic duct accurately with the left hand, and then you're injecting the dye in the right hand. This is and so this is I think this is task number 1.
Yeah.
And then that then is represented. That task is then represented by the graphics, the very simple graphics. So here we go. If you look at what happens with the graphics now. So you grab the ball, you move the ball and hold it accurately inside this square, the transparent square, and then you transfer between instruments. This example is where you're trying to tease the cystic duct, or to tease the gallbladder away from the underlying tissue, and so you're moving the instruments. You're moving the instruments over each other, and if it goes red, that indicates you've penetrated too far. So it's then you reorientate the angle of the cylinder. Very simple, very basic tasks, but it gets them used to using the laparoscopic instruments. The final one, which is the most complex task, was holding the tissue in place, removing the object, removing the instrument, which you'll see now, and then the box appears. You have to hold it accurately inside the box, and then you have these little red cubes. You then bring in your diathermy probe, and you actually put your foot on a foot pedal to simulate burning that off. And you mustn't penetrate too far. You mustn't miss the object, and it delivers a simulated amount of current to burn it off. And this is one of many gynecological skills that we trained as well. Again, with well known. In fact, the surgeon I worked with is actually now the chief gynecologist for the royal family. So he's quite a famous guy now, and this is MIST. You can see it. At the great thing about this was we managed to get this done on a PC as opposed to a graphics supercomputer, and because of that, for nearly 10 years, MIST was the de facto training solution for Europe. So those 4 afternoons that we spent working with surgeons in the operating theatre justified to me the use of human factors to define the training elements that these guys need to move to graduate from open surgery to keyhole surgery. And we were able to measure all kinds of things and come up with almost like a certificate at the
Yeah,
end.
and the analytics also looks in 3D. Wow.
Yeah,
So
yes, yes, that's right. Also in 3D, but there were so many things going on that we needed to record to be able to
yeah, here.
reliably measure surgical performance.
This is incredible because I have worked on something similar, a couple of projects which was something similar. I have worked on a lot of neurosurgery simulations, like ventriculostomy and several others. Then I have worked on a lot of abdominal related cases and cardiac related cases,
Yeah.
and simulating the tissue and tear with, of course, the current updated graphic technologies. And the core task is still the similar, to basically convince a surgeon that whatever he's doing is something real, and give them
Yes.
the training of suture and all those kind of things. So
Yeah.
I totally relate to that. The complexity is, even in today's time, it's really complex as a task,
Mm.
to make the surgeon believe that he's learning something new, or basically giving the training that will be useful in the actual OT environments. So this is really incredible, comparing, let's say, in 1990s, when I was not even born. It is incredible. So that was healthcare, and the company Mist VR is for healthcare. So you also develop all those scissors and all those equipments. So how did you manage you manage the hardware and the software, both things complete end to end in the Mist VR, right?
Yes, I mean the hardware was
How
one.
big was the team at back then? How big was
Um,
funding and team?
not yes, not very much, not very much funding at all. But the team was, I think, maybe there may be three people involved in this. We had the frame, that held the laparoscopic instruments, which was optically encoded to track the movement of the real instruments and feed that into the simulation. That was something that was a contract we placed on an external company to our design. But I think in terms of the software, there were probably only two people working on that at any one time, because it was one of a number of projects. We've never had a big team. I mean, the largest my team was at the university was 4 people.
Wow. And all of these products looks really like, even in today's perspective, they look finished products that surgeon can still use and train.
Yeah, I mean, some of our projects obviously are very prototype in nature, and they look prototype. But what the MIST product, because it became a product, and the Cutlass bomb disposal simulator, by teaming up with local hardware manufacturers that we could work with, we were able to. And it's quite unusual for a university, but we were able to produce a professional packaged product with all the right CE markings and MHRA and all these kind of things, the medical regulations people.
Okay, so coming back to when we are talking about, let's say, virtual reality, completely immersive environments where you put into someone and you take responsibility of that person, that the whatever he's gonna see, you are responsible, right? So it's a very big responsibility, and even in today's time, I have taken so many lectures where I guide about what not to do when you are putting someone in that environment. Whenever I see a roller coaster ride, I'm like, a big no, that's a big no. That's what you not do in VR, because you have taken. So now, what I want to ask is, basically, VR sickness is a big thing, and that is something that makes people hesitate about wearing the VR for the next time.
Yeah.
So especially in your time when the graphic technology, sensory technology, everything was like so incredibly, comparatively so less powerful, and the VR sickness still is a thing. So how you were tackling that from the hardware and software perspective, as well as what's your take on this today? How it is today? Because still people complain about that.
Yeah, and they will, and they will. I remember there was an American Army project which looked at all the different things that influence cyber sickness or virtual reality sickness, and there are a number of components. I mean, there's sex, there's cognitive style, there's age, there are all kinds of things. But I remember that researcher stated that no matter what you do, 3 to 5% of the population will still experience nausea or sickness within the first minute or two of putting a headset on. And we see that in real life, and it is an issue for us. Everywhere we go, every system we deliver, we have 2 sheets of not regulations, of recommendations of what to do, what to look for when somebody is in a headset. We have minimum and maximum times to spend in a headset. I know we see a lot of people online who spend 1 day, 2 days, a whole week in a virtual reality headset. Well, that's just crazy. Those people are crazy. And you're right about the roller coaster. I do not do roller coasters in virtual reality. Forget it. I'm okay in VR, but roller coasters, no. And again, even children, sometimes I get horrified when I see online really, really young children being put into headsets for long periods of time. Then I let my grandchildren look at virtual reality, maybe for 20, 30 seconds, but you have to hold the headset. You know, their necks are not developed enough. Their interpupillary distance, their interocular distance has not developed. There's so many things. I mean, it starts to get slightly better at the age of 8, but even then, you have to be very, very careful about supervising children, because and then as they get older, and into early teens, they are more susceptible to motion sickness. So I always say that with all our projects, we have a duty of care to inform people about the risks of virtual reality and what they should and shouldn't do. And we've always given these recommendations, obviously free of charge, and what to do if somebody experiences sickness. Sit them down in a quiet place, give them some water. Don't let them get into a car for maybe an hour afterwards. So it's something we've taken very, very seriously. We have had in my 38 years, we have had 2 people actually be sick. One was an elderly lady who wouldn't listen to us. I mean, we saw her lips going blue, and she was showing, and she was getting very clammy and sweaty, but she wouldn't listen to us. Next thing, bleh, that was it. That was not very nice. The other person who was sick was the then it was the chief executive of the UK's main submarine company. So that was well, yeah, we better do something about this really quickly. But again, some of the work we do with the old people and people in hospitals. One of my colleagues, Vish Singari, did his PhD specifically looking at the introduction of virtual reality into intensive care. One of the reasons why I love the small Vive Flow headsets is because they only monitor or register the head in rotation, roll, pitch, and yaw, not translation. So when you have somebody in bed, when you have somebody in a big armchair, as in, for example, in a care home, you don't want them to get up and walk around, not at their age and not on their condition, because it's not safe. It will make them ill. But if they're sat quietly in a seat and they can look around, or they will look up slowly up and down, we've not had one example, not one example of people of the age of 70, 75 years older, some of them even 90s, some of them in their 90s, no examples of sickness or disorientation or nausea at all.
But even
But
in 3D of headsets, the content has to be like, we have to take care of the content, that the camera in the camera motion is not there. It has to be mapped to a head itself. If let's say even in 360 videos, when the camera start moving, people even fall from let's say wherever they are. If they are not like properly sitting, they could fall as well.
that's really interesting, because one of our favorite, and again you can see this on YouTube, one of our favorite 360s is when we put somebody, and particularly old people, on the front of a steam train, right at the front of the steam train. So if they look down, they can see the railway track going under their legs, and they can look around, they can look up, they can turn around and see the engine and the chimney stack. And we've had no problems at all with disorientation or falling when they're sat in their seats. They just sit down, they listen to the sound of the railway engine, they listen to the sound of the track, and they see this lovely countryside around them. The same is true of the Spitfire. The Spitfire flight, again, Spitfire flight is on my YouTube site. But right towards the end of the Spitfire flight, it does a victory roll. So it goes upside down. And that doesn't cause any problem, particularly with older people. That's it. So there you are. That's in 360. So you're sat right on the front of the train. And if you can move the video further a bit, because it takes some time to start off. So if you can click on the line at the bottom, and again you have to have this running with sound, because the sound of the steam engine is superb. Yeah, that's fine. So that's the Dartmouth Steam Railway, which is one of the UK's leading steam railways. The other one that's worth recording, I think, is the Spitfire, because the older people love the Spitfire flight.
Yeah.
And
I also saw your work on submarines. So you created any kind of simulator for the submarines, or navigation system, or some kind of thing?
the submarine, the main submarine project was called Subsafe, and that was a project that was designed to overcome the problem that the Royal Navy's finding is that they got fewer and fewer submarines. So being able to take the new submariners onto a submarine to get them familiar with the layout, get familiar with the safety equipment, that's getting more and more difficult. In fact, now I think our final Trafalgar class submarine has now been decommissioned, or is being decommissioned, and we've got 4 Astute class submarines and 3 Vanguard class submarines, and that's it. So the idea was to create a virtual reality recreation of the interior submarine, and then to allow the young guys the young guys who go on board the submarine to become familiar with the safety aspects. And that was quite a challenge, because when we did that project in again mid-2000s, I think it was, there was no computer-aided design information about that class of submarine. Nothing. We had to build that submarine by ourselves. So we had to go on the submarine, we had to take a camera, and we had to take tape measure, and we had to measure everything, photograph everything, and then build the submarine. It took 9 months, which was quite amazing. In contrast, more recently, we've taken a 3D scanning, a Matterport scanner, onto a heritage submarine, and we were able to do that entire submarine, well, from the nuclear reactor compartment forward. We were able to do that in just over 1 day. So from 9 months of 3D construction to 1 day of 3D scanning, that's a heck of a difference. That really is.
So when we are
But
talking about the earlier method, you have to kind of tape everything with the measures and everything, and by each component, and then redesigned on your existing vector tools, right? Compared to
yes,
today, we have technologies like photogrammetry and things like that, which
yeah,
simply stitch pictures together and recreate the whole thing in 3D.
that's exactly. Well, that's what we do. We use the Matterport scanner. I mean, the Matterport scanner is laser based, or it's lidar, and you've got the photographs as well as the scanner, and it rotates in 360, and it's literally done. It's done in a matter of hours. Just it's incredible to see that technology, having spent all that time on board a submarine back in the 2000s. But it was successful. It was successful, and it actually was used. It convinced the Canadian Navy and the Australian Navy to do exactly the same. So we were quite proud of that project. It was also used. Sadly, it was also used at a coroner's inquest, because of an explosion that happened on board one of the submarines, HMS Tireless, which I had the honour of actually going on board and diving in HMS Tireless. But it was used at the court to show the families of the two young guys who died exactly what happened in terms of the way in which the explosion and the aftermath of the explosion was handled. So that was quite a sad occasion.
So you mentioned the heritage sites. So you have worked on the heritage restoration and revisualization of. So you have, I mean, how the process looks like now, and when we talk about the early days, how the heritage virtual reality systems used to work then, because I have seen a couple of heritage. Or museums and things like that being reconstructed in today's time versus earlier. So how used to things look like that?
Well, the heritage work. I always said that the heritage is my number one passion in virtual reality, because with virtual heritage we can make the invisible visible. We can turn back time, and importantly, we can work with older people, local people who may have material that's very valuable. So, for example, photographs or newspaper cuttings, or they've got loads and loads of information. Our first virtual reality projects was were in the 90s, the early 90s, where we recreated a painting by a famous British artist called L.S. Lowry. Lowry used to depict his paintings in a very cartoon-like style, with little matchstick figures, a very stylized type of painting. And we were able to bring this painting to life. So you walk into our virtual museum, you walk up to the painting, and then you get sucked into the painting. This is also on my YouTube. It's very grainy because it was made originally using VHS video, but you're able to take people into the painting and see what's on the other side. The other project in the 90s, which was for us a first, was Stonehenge, and that was a project that was commissioned by English Heritage, and we were able to take the photogrammetric, just as you mentioned earlier, the photogrammetric scans of the stones, convert them into 3D polygonal format, texture them with photographs, and then add certain pieces of information that the general public would not see. So, for example, not many people realize when they're walking around Stonehenge that there is graffiti on one of the stones, and that
Oh,
graffiti was by Sir Christopher Wren. And Sir Christopher Wren, of course, was the architect behind the great St. Paul's Cathedral in London. But again, making the invisible visible. This is what heritage is all about. And that's how it started, by bringing a painting to life and by making things that people can't see visible. And since then, we've been working on railway heritage, underwater heritage, wrecks, old aircraft museums, a huge number of examples. That's the 3D museum that we put
Wow.
together.
And it's in 1995. It's seriously staged out of the art graphics there.
That was Silicon Graphics. That was definitely a Silicon Graphics. Yeah, that was a I think that was
Wow.
probably a reality engine. Move that out of the way there. So again, I mean, it was really quite it was quite a lucky project. We were only given 12 days to make this, and if it had been any other artist other than Lowry, we wouldn't have done it, because you can see Lowry's very simple style, uh, and, and and say he used these what he called matchstick figures. So we were able to get away with using very simple leg animations, and as I say, with only 12 days, we had to do as best we can. Fortunately, where we were based in Salford, in Manchester, they had the Lowry Museum, so we had access. We were able to go and scan or photograph at very high detail the actual Lowry paintings, which was fantastic.
Even in today's time, building such a project in 12 days, it's truly ambitious. So even in today, if somebody's gonna tell me that, okay, build an entire museum, you look at one painting, you go into that and come out of different painting. It is pretty ambitious, and it is pretty creative as well.
Yeah, I wish somebody would fund us to do that project again. I would love to do that project with
With
today's
today's tech,
technology,
yeah.
and maybe choose some more pictures just so that you could see Lowry's how Lowry he referred to them as dreamscapes. So it's just to see different paintings, to go into the different paintings, and if you go with the quality that we had, you could go right up to the walls and you could see the individual brushstrokes on the paintings in the virtual world. It was
So
lovely
everything
project.
is recreated for you, right? Because camera capturing or the things like that were not an option for this, because you have to do it in such a low RAM that capturing recreating these things via capture was not an option, right?
Well, we used, I think at the time we didn't have any. I don't think we didn't have any digital cameras, so we actually took photographs using 35 mil film, and then rendered them or scanned them as best we could to get the best resolution we could for the time. Silicon Graphics, the rendering power of Silicon Graphics was really good at that time. So obviously the best we had in a long time, um, but we had no means of scanning anything. There weren't any portable scanners or portable 3D 3D technology that we could use.
So, you already mentioned you wish to recreate this in, let's say, today's technology. When we are talking about today's technology, what do you think about, let's say, today's headsets like, let's say, Vision Pro or, of course, the Quest?
Well, I think in many respects, the headsets that we see today, apart from the quality of the image, hasn't really changed that much from the 1990s. They're still cumbersome to use. You still have to put something on your head. I mean, I don't like to use the word immersion, because immersion to me is what you see on Star Trek with the holodeck, when you are free from having to wear anything. Today's headsets, I wasn't very impressed. I did get to see the Vision Pro. I wasn't very impressed with how the Vision Pro was marketed. It just seemed to be a glorified headset for looking at movies on an aircraft. It just, and you couldn't get down to the main subsystems, which we need to get down. If you think, particularly if you want to do pass through, mixed reality and pass through techniques. So we didn't actually buy a Vision Pro. We did buy Quest 2, Quest 3s. They they're okay. I mean, we use them. We use them, and they're fine. They're standalone. It's reasonably straightforward to get them linked to a PC if you need to have them tethered. Memory wise and rendering wise, You need to ask me again in a week's time, because my son just next door is trying to get the International Space Station onto a Quest 3 at the moment, and it's his language is terrible. When he comes down to let me know how things are going, his language just deteriorates. I think he's finding it a challenge. So the Quest 3 was a good step. I mean, the original Oculus, the Oculus DK1, or that was quite, having had many years of mediocre headsets that promised everything and delivered nothing. The original Oculus was a breath of fresh air. It wasn't perfect, but it was a move in the right direction. And now it's just kind of more of the same. So we'll see what's on the horizon. And we've tried most of them. So we've tried HTC Vive. My two favorites of recent years, the HP Reverb, the Reverb 2. I like that headset. The Odyssey. That's not Samsung. What was the then the Odyssey headset? Those were really good for plug-in headsets. They were really good. I can't fault them, but again, still quite cumbersome. The Quests, yes, we're using the Quest. The Flow for certain applications, primarily 360. We'll see. We'll see what comes out next. But I'm sometimes very. I seem sometimes come over as very negative on online. For example, in LinkedIn.
Yeah, recently I
Only,
saw one of your posts where you are mentioning about mixed reality. That now finally they have mixed reality.
yeah, I know. It's like sometimes I feel that these people, especially in the big companies like Meta or Microsoft, I don't think they get it. I really don't think they get it. They're so focused on tech and not focused enough on the end user. And then when it says, what is it, Microsoft, was it not Meta have redefined mixed reality. And what does Meta include in mixed reality? Virtual reality and mixed reality. Well, that's really confusing. I mean, why? Why would they do that? So just because you've got a big name doesn't mean to say you are savvy enough to define what other people, me included, have been doing for decades. Just get on with what you're good at and leave that stuff to people who've been doing it for a long time. Yeah,
So
that's
in
sometimes.
Meta Store right now, we have a lot of let's say documentaries within virtual reality. These are 360 videos where you can kind of experience the whole thing. One of my favorite is The Key. Have you ever watched that?
The Key. No, I haven't watched that.
It's amazing. So it talks about key which is left for you basically try to find a key. I don't want to spoil it for you, and what that key opens, you figure out in the journey, right? So that's a beautiful project, and there are several documentaries coming on Metastore. Also, there is Asgard's game, Asgard's Wart, which I played, and that to me, like it is like Prince of Persia, but you are playing within virtual reality. So it's you
Mm,
can do all those moves which you used to do in Prince of Persia, and then you can
yeah,
experience the VR system in there.
I'm still waiting. I'm still waiting for the next installment of my favorite game to come out, which is Half-Life,
Yep.
Half-Life 3. I don't want to play anything until they bring out Half-Life 3. Um, I mean, I didn't even get that far in Half-Life Alex. I thought, oh, okay, but I think Half-Life was the only game really that that over the last many years has really captured my attention, and I wanted to go back and play it. Or I mean, things like Call of Duty. Well, it's all the same, isn't it? I mean, Call of Duty and all those shoot 'em up games, they're all the same. But don't forget, I'm getting old now, so what I like, your audience may think, well, what's he talking about? You know,
So there is a multiplayer game called HyperQuest. Have you tried that?
No, no,
So
no.
it's about like getting making a team, and then there is a very good like 5 versus 5, and other people's goal is to basically carry a payload to your location, and then you play from their perspectives as well, where you are carrying the load in the enemy zone. So and they try to shoot you, you try to avoid it, and then there are so many power ups so that you can prevent your shooting them. And multiplayer makes it really amazing, because when you are playing that, you can interact with people, talk to your team that where the enemies and things like that, and that makes it really good game. So I have played a very few games, but a few that I played were like amazed me. And then there are fitness applications in the XR domain, which like helps you a lot. But my focus is building applications which can be let's say data driven, which add values in your day-to-day life. So let's say
Yes.
allows you to help you with your finances, because unless we have not those things, Meta I think focus too much on gaming. What do you think about that?
Well, there aren't enough truly available serious game. We call them serious games applications out there that are designed in such a way that people want to try them. Well, they may try them once, but then they tend not to use them again. And some of the games that we do use, I mean, I can't even remember. My you need to speak to my son when it comes to gaming on things like the Quest and what have you. We do use some of the artistic games um, on the Quest at some of our hospices and care homes. You know, 3D painting, tilt brush. Uh, they're quite good because they also involve arm movement, which is kind of good for cardiac. I mean, you can tell me that.
Yeah.
I hope. But I think some of the serious games has a lot to be thanked. We have a good reason to thank the serious games community, because if it wasn't for the serious games community at the end of the 1990s, virtual reality would have died. It was only because serious games came along and produced visual experiences that the graphics card developers had to modify or develop the next stage of graphics cards in order to support them. Then the serious games community launched, and it's gone very quiet over the last 5 or 6 years. But yeah, I think that's something you need to speak to my son. I think because when it comes to games, I think you're talking to the wrong person, except for Half-Life.
Yeah. So what you liked about the Half-Life the most?
Oh, the just the atmosphere. So it's the combination of, particularly in certain elements. For example, in Half-Life 2, they had this scene that was or this level that was carried out in something called Ravenholm.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I never forget when you come onto that level, the music, the sound effects, and just the sheer Armageddon of the imagery, just the imagery, always makes my hair stand on end. Now, for anything on a computer to make my hair stand on end, that's good. That to me is the mark of a good game. So if you combine the sound with really real ethereal type graphics, ethereal type scenes and what have you, that's what I like about Half-Life. It's also the anticipation. With most shoot 'em up games, you know that if you're going to turn a corner, then the insurgents are going to open fire, and you go prepared.
Yeah.
But with Half-Life, you just, when you played it just for the first time, you had no idea. And it's that kind of anticipation accompanied by the sound and the vision, and maybe one day smell, which is another area of my interest.
So you
The
have built so many experiences in various domains. Have you? Because I didn't find in the text what you have sent me. Have you ever worked in the marketing space with the help of XR?
um, no, not marketing. I'm just trying to think, going back to 1990s. Not marketing in the strict sense of the word. I mean, we certainly we worked with companies in the 1990s, companies like Procter and Gamble, companies like different different individual companies that make toothbrushes, toothpaste, hygiene, and what have you. But that was really to digitize their product and to put the product onto a virtual shelf and see how that product stood out from competing products around it. And I think that's kind of the closest we've ever come to marketing as such. We've not done anything. I'm trying to think. I'm trying to go back now. So it's been mostly in the retail sector, but very little else.
So I have did something very similar what you just mentioned. So my product was basically when you enter into, let's say, a shopping mall, we created the exact replica of a marketplace, and in this survey we are measuring where exactly the person is looking at. So what products he is looking at, a heat map of
Yeah.
his vision, his
Yes.
and dividing that into age groups gives you a lot of insight where to place what product. So
Yeah.
something similar kind of a thing. But yes,
Yeah.
marketing is also becoming a great industry for XR.
We used we looked into eye tracking with supermarket shelf location back in the 90s, and it was that was really quite good because you could move the products around, you could change the packaging, you could change the colors, and see how that influenced the search, the saccadic eye movement search. Very powerful technique.
Incredible. So you have spent so much years into education space as well. So you are right now, I guess, professor at Buckingham, right?
Birmingham, yeah.
Birmingham. So for about 22 years, you are into like education space as well. So people who are new to the industry or trying to come into the XI industry, since you have so much experience into that and you are already teaching so many people, you have trained so many great engineers in this space. What is your message to these people?
The number one message, and I don't teach anymore because I'm now emeritus professor, so I've kind of retired, but I still carry on doing research. But to my students, and I've had some very good students, what I've always said to them: if you want to get involved in the XR industry, develop your own portfolio. Have a portfolio of all your work. Okay, so if you look, for example, at the way in which the games industry recruits people, then they don't want a CV. They want to see something that you've done that's on the web. They want to see something that you've done that's on a CD or a memory stick or whatever. So if you genuinely want to get involved in XR, and there aren't that many good XR courses out there. I mean, I didn't have an XR course. I had XR modules within electronics courses. And I think that's a good move. I don't believe, even today, we saw this in the 1990s. I don't believe today that full-blown degrees in XR are actually necessary. I think they're not a good move. You need a mainstream topic and an XR interest or XR modules or an XR project, but not an XR degree. That makes you jack of all trades, master of none. But if you are serious about getting involved in XR, find yourself a supervisor who is involved in this area. Make sure that you undertake projects that are definitely relevant to the outside world, that have impact, that have meaning to real people doing real jobs in the real world. Evaluate those projects in the real world. So, for example, all my students would take their projects out and test them in hospitals. They would test them as best we can, given the fact that ethical clearance takes forever, which is so annoying. But try and demonstrate that you've not just built a 3D model, that you've built a story, a narrative, that you've tested this out in the real world. You've collected responses from people who've tried it out, and put together a portfolio. Put together a portfolio that shows your 3D capabilities, your 3D artistic capabilities, and your ability to pull these things together into a real-time nicely rendered virtual reality narrative that you've evaluated. Because don't just think that you can do XR in a classroom or in a laboratory. You can't. There are too many academic organizations across the world that put together these really expensive labs, and they do nothing. They do nothing for students, and they do nothing for industrial users. They're just collections of technology. The students deserve much, much more.
I thought only in India it's the state that we create labs, but our students are not still not getting that much of education quality.
That's a shame. I mean, that is a real shame, because when I started at the University of Birmingham, I was even though my background's in psychology and human factors, I was in the Department of Electronics and Electrical Engineering. So I'm thinking, oh my goodness me, how can I interest these students in virtual reality? It wasn't a problem. I had students coming to me, let's say undergraduate students, coming to me in June, which is when they come to select their project. And by October, they were producing the most amazing demonstrations that I've seen in a long, long time. One of which we're still using. So again, if you go onto the 360 video section of my website, there's a mountain scene that's been narrated by Sir David Attenborough. Now that was developed by a young lady called Elsa, who came to me in June. No 3D experience, no virtual reality experience, nothing, and she put that together in October, and we've been using it ever since. I was using it this weekend at a healthcare event in our local village, our local town centre, and we're still using it today. And if you can get the right students and get them motivated and give them the skills and the tutorials, which are all online, as long as they have that mentality, they can do fantastic things.
So most of your research has been, it's my last question. So it's most of your research has been into human factors and how people behave in, let's say, defense or something like that. So solving that with technology like XR and looking at the current perspective, the current world technologies, what do you think? How it's going further, and what's the future in this space?
Well, I am biased, but I think ever since we did that minimally invasive surgical training project, where we learned a very hard lesson about don't design without getting the users involved. And I think we will see all kinds of wow, glamorous technology being announced online that will promise everything. What we always recommend is that forget the technology. Put technology one side. If you come into a project and you say, I want to use this headset, I want to use this controller, I want to use haptics, I want to use whatever, then the chances are you'll fail. If you, however, spend time looking, as I say, I use this phrase, looking at real people doing real jobs in the real world and thinking about what it would be, what is it, where is their training failing? Where is their job failing? And can XR provide either a solution on its own or part of a hybrid technology solution? So we have a procedure, and it's a procedure based on an international standard, which I'll just say, and if people want to contact me, they can. It's international standard ISO 9241 part 210. That is the Bible. There's a chart in there which shows exactly what you have to do in order to understand the people who are using the technology, understand the context in which they're working, then develop solutions, test them, develop, test, and then only when you've gone through evaluations with people, it comes at the other end and stands a good chance of success. So, I mean, for example, I've been on LinkedIn recently where I've been very critical of the Americans' integrated visual augmentation system, IVAS. I said from the start, this stands a very good chance of failing. You can't just take something like the HoloLens and put the components into a military helmet and expect the armed forces to use those helmets, or expect it to survive in the conditions in which they perform. You can't. And they say, oh, well, we did consult with soldiers. And no, you didn't. If you had done, you would have realized that this technology is not fit for purpose. So now all those billions have been spent. They're now going to subcontract quite a large amount of money, or a very large amount of money, to this company Arduril, which is Palmer Luckey. Palmer Luckey's organization. And my question is, well, will they learn? Have they learned? Are they going to get a human factors person in to drive this from a human-centered perspective? That's the way I believe virtual reality XR will evolve and should evolve in the future. Stop producing technology like Vision Pro. Yeah, here today, gone tomorrow. Very few things that we see online have any legacy or sustainability. Very few. So, but if you start off with the human in mind, then at least you stand a slightly better chance in the future of taking what you've developed and modifying it appropriately.
So it sounds really obvious, but it is really hard to be on the consumer centric level, and it is getting hard and harder. So a lot of people make this mistake, as you just mentioned. They don't pack the right tools, they focus on packaging more tools instead. And then iteration process is too vast. It has to be like very quick. You have to iterate really quick, test with the market, and see how they are using it, and then iterate again. So you mentioned a really cool points to us, and thank you, Professor Bob. It was really insightful for us, and we got a really cool perspectives. However, it is really hard to cover all of your work of 4 decades in one
Yes.
conversation, right?
Yeah, it's impossible. I mean, so much has happened in so many different sectors, and uh, it's been an amazing experience. And say, it's all down to that one chance visit I had to NASA back in 1987, but it changed my career, and I'm really glad it did.
Yeah, and believe me, your conversation today is going to change a lot of, give them a lot of perspectives. A lot of people who are beginning into this journey and starting their careers, they're gonna take a lot of inspiration from you, Professor Bob, especially in India and in UK and everywhere in the world. You are a true pioneer of the industry, and it was a great honor to have you on this conversation.
That's very kind of you to say. Yes, it's been a great chat, and some great questions. And yes, I hope it inspires a few people to not give up, and go out there and make it happen. Thank you ever so much.
Thank you, Professor.